Happy 59th anniversary. Now, the Institute of Library Science was open or rather established May 11, 1960. And so from that time to this time, we have both graduate and undergraduate students. I am a Levi Barber Scholar. At the same time, I am a Fulbright travel grantee. And I was given, the University of Michigan gave me an international award because of my work as a student. So I was given the Alumni Recognition Award, the first award given this year.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Webinar Wednesdays. Today we have a special treat for you, a lecture entitled Responding to Challenges, Transforming LIS Pedagogy. I am Ina Therese Santos, a faculty member from the UP School of Library and Information Studies. This webinar is the second installment in our wittily named Webinar Wednesdays. Actually, we have a long lineup of webinars and features in store for you as part of our celebration of the 59th anniversary of UP SLIS. Before I proceed, for a more pleasurable viewing experience, please note that this webinar is in HD. Kindly adjust your Facebook settings to get a clearer version of the video. This afternoon's webinar is a timely lecture specifically for us LIS educators. We are living in a time of uncertainty, and this has cascaded into all aspects of our life. One major effect of this COVID-19 situation is the shift from the traditional face-to-face learning to remote learning. Our session this afternoon hopes to help us teachers have an idea how to cope with such pedagogical challenges. This lecture will feature not just a discussion of these above-mentioned topics, but also sharing of experiences specifically in the School of Library and Information Studies in the adjusted modes of teaching, learning, and the overall learning process. Our webinar will be led by two experts in the field of LIS education. We have Mr. Elijah John Dar Juan, a faculty member from the School of Library and Information Studies, who teaches our very popular LIS GE course, LIS 10, Information and Society. We also have our beloved Dean of the UPSLIS, Professor Mary Grace Golfo-Barcelona, who specializes in archives and records management and is currently a PhD student of anthropology from the University of Manitoba. I'm sure you're all excited to watch our webinar, but before I pass the microphone to our speakers, let me briefly give you the mechanics of this webinar. We will have a Q&A after the lecture. Please note that we will not be entertaining questions posted in the comment box. Instead, please send in your questions via Menti. The code is flashed on screen. If a question you wish to ask has already been asked, please upvote the question so we can address it. We will be issuing certificates of participation to those who will be joining us today. We ask that you finish the event and watch out for the announcement containing the link to where you can register for your certificate. So please stay with us until the end of the webinar for this link. Finally, parts of the lecture have been pre-recorded due to a power interruption in the area of one of our speakers. But don't worry, because the Q&A will be conducted in real time. Again, for this, go to www.menti.com and use the code 388717. Thank you so much, and on with the lecture.
Good afternoon to all of our viewers for this webinar, especially to our colleagues in the business of LIS education. We welcome LIS instructors and administrators with us, along with librarians, archivists, and practitioners in the LIS profession engaged in instructional activities. We thank you for tuning in, and we hope that after this session, you have gained knowledge on the challenges in teaching and learning brought about by recent events and how we can respond as LIS educators. COVID-19 has drastically changed our daily way of life. In the past months, we have transitioned to the new normal of wash your hands, wear a face mask, and stay at home. Mass gatherings have been discouraged and travel restrictions have been imposed to prevent the spread of the virus. The formal educational system is also not immune from the effects of the pandemic. The Department of Education and the Commission on Higher Education has declared that the academic year will push through. They have instituted policies and guidelines in the light of the requirements of community quarantine, including no face-to-face classes. With that, the academic community transitions. We are in the process of veering away from face-to-face and blended learning. Before, we handle learning activities within our classrooms and give homework and other tasks for students to learn on their own in learning spaces outside the classroom. Clearly, with face-to-face learning, interaction with the teacher and the learners are present. I, as a teacher, see my classroom as a stage where I physically perform and communicate as I handle class. I know we teachers surely are capable of sensing how our students react with the lessons being presented in class. Interaction among learners is also readily accessible in the face-to-face mode. We also nurture a physical environment where students themselves can freely express their thoughts and learn from each other's insights as they interact with each other. Prior to the pandemic, we have also been exposed to the concept of blended learning. According to Garrison and Kanuka, blended learning is the thoughtful integration of classroom face-to-face learning experiences with online learning experiences. In simpler terms, blended learning may be seen as the integration of e-learning methods with face-to-face instruction. When we use an online learning management system and require online-based tasks to our students alongside class meetings, we may well be conducting blended learning. Since we cannot facilitate face-to-face classes, we have resorted to remote learning as a mode to facilitate instruction. Students and teachers do not meet in the physical classroom, but in a virtual classroom. Remote learning is often connected with online learning and e-learning as popular modes of remote learning are conducted using the internet. Commonly with this setup, it is necessary for students and teachers to have electronic devices and online connectivity. Because LIS teachers have the knowledge in information and communication technologies, it may seem easy to transition to remote learning, right? But the primary challenge we face as educators with remote learning is that we cannot meet our students in person and we cannot feel the energy of the classroom environment. Implementing a fully effective remote learning experience alongside a student-centered pedagogy takes an extensive amount of effort and expertise. Now, before we move on, let me clarify a popular misconception about remote learning. That remote learning is not always online learning. Online learning is one of the modes of remote learning. It may be conducted, or remote learning may be conducted through mass media such as radio and television, and information and communication technologies such as voice calls, SMS, and email. When these systems and technologies are not in place, remote learning may be conducted via offline means. If the student has a computer but do not have internet, a USB device may be sent containing the learning materials. Remote learning may also be delivered via non-electronic means, since printed materials may be sent to the student via courier. Remote learning may be done synchronously or having real-time online classes, much like teleconferencing or this webinar we're conducting today. It may also be done asynchronously, where students are not required to be online at the same time to meet with the teacher and their fellow learners. For this information, I would give due credit to the course we designed for remote learning course offered by UP to its faculty members. The move towards remote learning is just one of the many challenges we in the academic community are facing. Aside from this, we are also faced with pedagogical hurdles that were already in existence even before the pandemic started. COVID-19 or not, there are still challenges educators should face and conquer. We are living in a constantly changing world. The changes in the educational landscape has brought forth new perspectives in the way we view and deal with our students, novel approaches in teaching and learning, solutions for lingering concerns, and fulfilling the higher purpose of education. Continuous change compels us to adapt and make the necessary modifications in the way we approach college instruction. To further explore these pedagogical challenges, I will be using the elements in the teaching and learning process as basis. According to our local sources on pedagogy, there are four basic elements in the teaching learning process. First are the learners as the center of the learning process. Second, teacher as the facilitator of learning. Content or the subject matter that the learners must have knowledge on. And the context where the act of learning and learned content are situated. We will be looking at the challenges within each of these four elements. First, we have challenges in dealing and relating with our learners. As the center of the learning process, we primarily have to consider them as student achievement of the learning objectives is the most important aspect of instruction. If our learners do not acquire the knowledge, skills, and competencies we aim to hand down, the whole conduct of teaching or learning is in vain. We should consider that students are not created using a cookie cutter. Each of them is unique and capable of accomplishing something. Because of this individuality, our learners may have different perspectives and different approaches on how they acquire knowledge and handle situations they may face. Our learners, especially here in UP, have diverse cultural and socio-economic backgrounds. From all corners of the country, they come from all walks of life. Some may have plenty, while some make both ends meet. Some may have trained to say po and opo at home, while others did not. Some of our students do not have direct access to the internet or their own laptop or computer to use. Finally, I see our learners of today face numerous and legitimate problems, concerns, and distractions surrounding them. Sometimes the tools available at their disposal or leisurely activities they do might become distractions in learning. These problems and concerns that haunt our students might be related to how they manage the academic requirements they need to fulfill. They may also be having physical illness and psychosocial ailments, such as stress, anxiety, and depression, that hinder their scholastic performance. This might be very evident during these times of isolation at home, away from their friends at school. They might also have concerns with their relationships, their family, their loved ones, and their friends. Some might be victims of peer pressure, bullying, or consider social isolation as means to cope. Finally, a lot of our students face constrictions with their monetary resources. Some might be working at night as BPO employees while studying in daytime to keep their heads above water. Considerations of learning styles, socioeconomic backgrounds, the problems they are facing, and the attention or interest towards the subject matter are some of the learner challenges we face. We must consider these challenges as we prepare for remote learning. Secondly, we teachers have challenges of our own besides those concerning our learners. Being on the sending end of the communication cycle, we initiate contact and convey the content to our students, right? One challenge is how to engage them with the content we are teaching and how we can encourage them to think and dig deeper with what we teach. We have limited time and resources at hand to give everything that the student needs to learn, and we should make the most of what we have to engage and inspire our learners. The success of our learners may be greatly influenced by our pedagogical methods. Another challenge that we face, or we teachers face, would be the continuous learning of the subject matter content, principles and strategies and pedagogy, and educational technologies through our study and research. As I have mentioned earlier, we always have a varied set of learners. There is also the constant progress of LIS as a field of study, which I will be delving into later. With these factors, we are also compelled to reevaluate the way we handle our classes and to make our content relevant and useful for our learners. Doing further study and research expands our horizons and makes us understand further what we are teaching. Aside from the things we do inside the classroom, we also have a room to elevate our teacher qualifications, such as pursuing advanced graduate degrees, writing book chapters and peer-reviewed journal articles, handling projects, and training practicing professionals. We are also challenged to uphold standard pedagogical practices and strengthen our ties with our colleagues in the LIS education career. I believe keeping our LIS teacher networks intact makes us stronger as a unit. And I commend the efforts of our Philippine Association of Teachers of LIS or PATLs in pursuing that endeavor. Now, third, we have challenges with the content we are teaching. As I have mentioned earlier, the library and information science field is a constantly changing discipline. We might have studied the LIS concepts during our time as learners, but I am sure most of them would not be as similar as the concepts we introduce to our learners today. Simply, the LIS we knew might not be completely identical to the ones we have today. We have to constantly learn and improve on what we know. We take on LIS as a constantly evolving and interdisciplinary field. There are trends and issues that are relevant to the courses that we teach. We are also faced with emerging facets of information studies, such as digital humanities, digital scholarship, information behavior, web ontologies, informatics, and information security. We also consider allied fields we might be dipping our toes into. I, for one, deal at times with psychological and sociological concepts as a secondary reading when I prepare some sessions for my LIS 10 class. Fourth and finally, we have the context of learning or the circumstances or the setting where learning and learned content are situated. Contexts may be within and outside the learning environment. A major challenge within the university for us teachers is the adequacy of tools and resources so that we can effectively carry out our functions. We hope and long for the ideal facilities and equipment that we can use. With the pandemic right now, we are not hard pressed so much with the concerns on equipping our classrooms and laboratories. What is essential right now are the tools and the learning resources and services we will be utilizing for remote learning courtesy of our libraries, learning resource centers, and our IT offices. We are also challenged with the movement towards internationalization of our education. Our openness to diversity and multiculturalism has led us to accommodate international students and faculty. There are times we have to handle classes in straight English, including our corny jokes, because there are foreign students in our class. Related to internationalization, our higher education institutions are also faced with the challenge of accreditation and recognition for our institution as indicators of excellence in education. Lastly, we are faced with the changing modes of instructional delivery. Even before the pandemic, there have been demands for a distance mode of education for numerous fields of study, including ours in LIS. We also have to deal with the challenges outside the four corners of our colleges and universities. One key challenge is on critical perspectives and how we integrate it in our LIS courses. Critical librarianship, according to Kenny Garcia, is the placement of librarianship within a critical theorist framework that is epistemological, self-reflective, and activist in nature. Mark Hudson notes that critical librarianship seeks to be transformative, empowering, and is a direct challenge to power and privilege. With our pedagogy, what can we do to transform and empower our students and the people around them? How can we be actively involved in positively influencing our society? As educators, we also have the duty to promote our social responsibility and community engagement within our school communities. As the UP tagline says, we shape the minds that shape the nation. We also have the challenge of championing positive values to our students, letting them realize that we should always do what is right even when others do not. We can empower our learners to stand firm to the values of truth, justice, equity, and the freedoms we enjoy in a democratic society, not just with the practice of librarianship and information, but also as responsible citizens of our country. In our pursuits as LIS educators, we have the challenge of producing librarians and information professionals who contribute towards the greater good of society. The way we interact with our students, the way we prepare and present the content that we teach, and the way we situate the content and the overall learning experience within contexts may all add up to overcome this challenge. We have seen that pedagogical challenges related to our learners, teachers, content, and contexts that we situate our learners and learning into. With these challenges, we should move forward with no one being left behind. Educators and administrators should ensure that all players in the learning process can keep up and adapt amid all the changes and challenges. Teachers should have the necessary skills and tools to facilitate learning, and the students are able to achieve the learning objectives they need to attain. Availability of an efficient structure or infrastructure to facilitate remote learning should be ensured. Students and teachers should have access to adequate resources and technologies. Students can cope with the lesser intervention from the teacher and more on self-study and self-paced learning. Teachers should also be ready for that extra preparation and extra monitoring in transitioning their materials to fit the remote learning techniques. Most importantly, everyone's health and overall well-being should be protected as anxieties and resistance normally arise due to change. Now, with what we are doing at UPSLIS and how we transition to remote learning, how we overcome these challenges, what we are planning to do, may I turn over the floor to our Dean, Dean Mary Grace Golfo-Barcelona.
Magandang hapon. As Sir Elijah just discussed, nobody came prepared for the situation we are in. More so the thousands of academic institutions all over the world. That also includes our school, the School of Library and Information Studies at the University of the Philippines. How then is SLIS coping with the challenges that this coronavirus pandemic has presented to us? With SLIS being a part of the University of the Philippines system, the school is operating within the core mandate and principles of the UP, and SLIS is driven to ensure the effective accomplishment of the purpose and functions of the university. Next slide, please. These purpose and functions are enumerated in RA 9500, also known as the University of the Philippines Charter of 2008. This law declares UP as the National University of the Philippines, and as such, UP is the primary partner of the government in promoting, fostering, nurturing, and protecting the right of all citizens to accessible quality education. As stated in Section 3, UP as the National University, a public and secular institution of higher learning and a community of scholars dedicated for the search of truth and knowledge, as well as the development of future leaders, the University of the Philippines shall provide unique and distinctive leadership in higher education and development. UP as the National University has the right and responsibility to exercise academic freedom. UP has the responsibility to maintain and enhance its high academic standards in the performance of its functions of instruction, research and extension, and public service. It shall harness the expertise of the members of its community and other individuals to regularly study the state of the nation in relation to its quest for national development in the primary areas of politics and economics. Among others, identify key concerns, formulate responsive policies regarding these concerns, and give advice and recommendations to Congress and the President of the Philippines. Among the purposes of UP as a national university includes to lead in setting academic standards and initiating innovations in teaching, research, and faculty development in all fields of study and maintain centers of excellence in such disciplines and professions. It also serves as a graduate university by providing advanced studies and specialization for scholars, scientists, writers, artists, and professionals, especially those who serve on the faculty of state and private colleges and universities. So these are just a few of the roles of UP as the national university. Needless to say, SLIS, like the rest of the constituents of UP, is mandated by these functions and is required to be consistent and in line with these purposes. Next slide, please. Likewise, it is also UP's mandate to ensure that graduates from the university University exemplifies the Tatak UP philosophy, which is embodied in the statement of the UP system, vision, mission, philosophy of education, and graduate attributes. This was approved during the Board of Regents meeting on its 1349 meeting held last 28 November 2019. So a UP education seeks to produce graduates imbued with an abiding sense of responsibility to their people and nation, the skills and mindsets to improve human life, and the commitment to the freedom and welfare of all. Aside from the mastery of knowledge in their specific disciplines, UP graduates must possess breadth of mind, strength of character, and generosity of spirit, fostered by a firm grounding in both the arts and sciences and such specialist courses as their programs may require. They must be prepared to inclusively engage with society and the world at large, mindful of their people's needs and capabilities, and keen to the challenges and opportunities of national development in this century of rapid global change. Hence, on top of the challenges of the current pandemic, is the responsibility to ensure that the SLIS graduates embody the TAC UP attributes. Next slide, please. So how is SLIS amidst the nationwide lockdown? As an academic institution, the first thing that came in consideration was how do we continue with our teaching. The second semester has just started and only a quarter or less of the proposed lecture were delivered. So ito yung pagka-declare ng lockdown sa nationwide lockdown. So discussions within the management level were held as often as possible, and every small decision was cascaded to the faculty members as often as you can imagine. With everyone working or staying at home, all were very anxious to get a more definite direction on how to handle the pandemic and how to return to how it used to be before the lockdown. First directive was to shift to online teaching. But then, realizing the health risks that this arrangement would cause those who had to leave the safety of their homes to get access to the internet, this directive was revised. One thing that also came with this realization was that while everyone was under stress trying to cope with the novel coronavirus pandemic, our students were especially affected. They've lost access to their friends, their campus communities, and the structure and rhythm of the academic year. Graduating students were worried they would not be able to attend the long-awaited commencement exercises and what would come next, sakali mang makagraduate sila. Moreover, there were students who have additional worries, including how to help their families financially and how to transition to online education. Sometimes in regions where access can't be taken for granted. Kasi hindi naman lahat may magandang access sa internet. Above all, the virus continues to spread and students worry that the health of loved ones or their own health could be at risk. Next slide, please. So the call for mass promotion surfaced. But then, going back to UP's mandate, how can you ensure that we do not remiss on our obligation as a national university? So we have these three principles that we have to uphold: honor, excellence, and there is compassion. UP could not turn a deaf ear to the distress call of its constituents, more so its students. Surveys and dialogues between and among students, faculty, staff, and UP administrators took place several times to come up with win-win solutions. Next slide, please. Among the changes done to cope with the unexpected lockdown, includes adjustment of academic calendar. So, mas maagang natapos yung academic calendar. Nagkasundo na instead na magbigay na numeric grade, P na lang or pass ang grade na ibibigay para dun sa mga makakakompleto ng mga course requirements, And then there is also calibration of course syllabi. So we had to revisit the learning objectives and set to the barest minimum to make it more attainable for students given the current situation. So next slide, please. Kasama pa rin dito yung suspension of academic rules and policies. So this SEM's grade not included in the computation of GWA. Pagkatapos yung extension or suspension ng MRR rule, tapos no students will get incomplete grade because they are given until next year. So 1 year para makompleto nila yung requirements ng mga courses na naka-enroll sila for this SEM. And then the holding of bridging classes for classes which require more time to meet the course objectives. And of course, meron ng online recognition and commencement exercises. So currently, bridging classes are being conducted in UP. Some of the SLIS faculty members are participating in this endeavor. Many milestone events happened and continue to happen because of the pandemic. Next slide, please. So embracing changes, preparing for remote learning. So extraordinary problems require extraordinary solutions. But this pandemic, historical and unusual it may seem, ushered us to venture to a new way of living and thinking that have been in the threshold, waiting for us to be discovered. We started to think out of the box and came up with solutions that are workable, realistic, sustainable, and beneficial to all given the current environment and available technology. As more resources become available to aid the remote method of teaching or learning, the decision of UP to hold remote teaching or learning this coming academic year 2020-21 was already expected. This decision didn't come out without resistance. Thus, the UP management still working on ways to ensure that no one will be left behind. Hanggang ngayon, they're still working on how to ensure na lahat makaka-participate sa remote learning. So preparations are underway to equip teachers and students for remote learning without forgetting the digital divide that is still very prevalent among the constituents of UP pati na rin sa mga faculty members. So these preparations includes review and assessment or taking stock. So ni-review yung environment, ano bang kasalukuyang nangyayari, what resources we have, ano ba yung mga resources na pwedeng ibigay or i-extend ng UP. And then there are training on course redesign, how to implement yung program, course delivery, and other possible student engagement. So maraming mga training ngayon na ginaganap sa UP. In fact, bukas mag-a-attend ang mga faculty ng SLIS ng training kung paano gumawa ng course packs in preparation for next SEM. So sa 2020-21 first SEM. So next slide, please. On a broader perspective, other LIS schools have also heeded the call to prepare for the blended or flexible teaching strategy na pinanawagan ng CHED. So CHED COVID Advisory 6 and 7 call for adoption of a flexible learning strategy or mode in delivering instructions by ensuring appropriate facility delivery system, faculty complement, and student support are provided and made available. Next slide, please. In response to this, the Council of Deans and Heads of LIS Schools, or COD-LIS, held a meeting last May 29, 2020, attended by more than 60 heads and teachers from LIS schools all over the country. In this meeting, it was agreed that the members of the LIS schools will adopt the matrix suggested by CHED to help member institutions to move forward towards blended or flexible teaching. The CHED matrix requires the identification of teaching and assessment activities for 3 categories or scenarios that students may find themselves in. So nung inilalatag dun sa matrix, yung dun sa activities naka-divide yun sa 3 scenarios. Meron yung para sa mga estudyanteng wala talagang internet connection. Merong mga estudyante na may connection pero mahina ang kanilang connection. At meron naman yung para sa mga estudyanteng maganda talaga yung kanilang connection sa internet. So ganun din pagdating dun sa assessment activities, identify din yung tatlong scenarios na yon para ma-address yung mga requirements ng mga estudyante kung ano man yung ano ba, kasalukuyang sitwasyon meron sila pagdating sa access sa online resources. So this initiative was led by former SLIS Dean Assistant Professor Kathleen Obile as representative of SLIS in CODLIS. In the process of these preparations, numerous resources to aid teachers and students with remote flexible learning were identified. So I'll turn you to Sir Elijah to discuss some of these available resources.
Thank you, Dean Grace. Believe it or not, there are numerous resources available at our disposal as we get started to prepare for remote learning. We hope that we have selected might be helpful for you. The course redesign course I mentioned earlier encourages faculty to utilize open educational resources. Open educational resources, or OER, are instructional resources freely made available online for educational access and use. These OERs may be in the form of textual, image, AV, or other online formats that are useful in delivering content, learning, and assessing student progress. A useful portal for OERs is the OER Commons at oercommons.org and Open Washington Open Resource Repository at openwa.org/find-OER. There are also universities such as the Massachusetts Institute of Technology and the University of Michigan, which organize portals that provide their course syllabi and lectures among other course materials they use in the number of courses they offer. We also have open access resources at our disposal. Open access journals are publications that employ an open publishing model. Their articles are distributed online free of charge, while some allow the freedom for copying and reuse. A popular repository of open access journals is the Directory of Open Access Journals, found at doaj.org. Many journal publishers also are offering options for open access publishing for their materials. Some of the journal titles in Wiley, Taylor and Francis, Oxford University Press, and others are of open access. I am also proud to say that our LIS journal, the Philippine Journal of Library and Information Studies, published by the UP School of Library and Information Studies, employs an open access publishing model. It has a long history of publication starting as the Journal of Philippine Librarianship in 1968. The journal tackles issues and developments from all fields in the area of library and information science within and outside of the Philippines. The journal may be accessed at thjlis.org. If you are interested to be published in the journal, you may look at its Call for Papers page. There are also websites that offer open access books and publications in the public domain. Notable online book repositories include Hathi Trust, Directory of Open Access Books, and Project Gutenberg. We all know that non-textual resources can further enhance learning since they provide an added dimension apart from text and further stimulate the senses. Resources that have a Creative Commons license are highly recommended since depending on the license, we may be allowed to freely use, distribute, or modify them. You can know more about the Creative Commons by visiting their website at creativecommons.org. Some of the content found in YouTube and Flickr, the popular photo sharing website, have Creative Commons licenses. Wikimedia Commons is an online repository of free use images, sound, and other media, while TED Talks may also be a good resource to consider, especially when probing further into the content that we teach. I know that we information professionals are skilled in evaluating information, but here are some reminders when we evaluate the content we will be using as learning resources. First is accessibility, as in accessible or being easily understood. The subject matter discussed within the resource should be written or presented so that students can clearly understand and relate with it. Second is currency, being current, up-to-date, and relevant to what we are supposed to teach. Third is richness. The resource should be deep enough to offer various examples, opinions, and perspectives, and is not limited to just one. Fourth is on the purposeful use of media. Bear in mind that the format of the resource should enhance the presentation of the content. The format should not be a distraction. distraction or a hindrance. Images may be utilized to convey what words may not. We should not always place a video just for the sake of showing video for the class to see. Video materials are recommended for demonstrating skills or those involving basic step-by-step procedures. Lastly, there is inclusivity. The resource should be inclusive in terms of social, cultural, and gender in its content. As much as possible, it should not put our learners on edge. For those who would like to create learning resources of their own, there are also available tools online. Canva is a useful tool for creating posters, slides, and graphic materials within its Canva for Education option. TED-Ed can also be used to create lessons using TED educational videos. Edpuzzle can also utilize videos from YouTube and a number of video platforms as lessons, integrating custom voiceover, embedding questions, and cutting sections. Lastly, with the belief that everyone's health and well-being should be taken care of, I am also putting here available means for psychosocial support. We have been fortunate in UP to have UP Diliman PsychServe and Ugnayan ng Pahinungod offering psychosocial services to our university students, faculty, and staff. We do hope that all higher education institutions have these kinds of health and wellness services. Again, we hope that these resources could help you get started in preparing for remote learning. To give some concluding remarks for this presentation, may I again turn the floor over to our Dean, Mary Grace.
So, transforming LIS pedagogy, future plans and directions. Ano nga ba ang ating plano at direksyon? It is still uncertain when experts can finally discover the cure for the coronavirus. As it is, Metro Manila is now back to MECQ, requiring stricter physical distancing measures. The condition of the pandemic, based on current numbers, is showing no improvement at all. Therefore, the need to plan on what directions to take in the immediate or longer future has to commence. For LIS education, how do we see this being done? Does this planning include transformation of LIS pedagogy to adapt to remote learning? And when talking about transformation, what do we mean with this concept? What would it entail? Next slide, please. For some, transformation may entail redesigning of the curriculum or the LIS program as a temporary measure or solution to this unusual circumstance, or as a permanent or long-term plan of action to ensure flexibility even when faced with yet another trying time like this. While for others, it may be an opportunity to implement the long-awaited plan to transcend to fully online methodology of teaching. Whether the transformation is temporary or long-term, the plans that LIS educators decide to take depends on the situation they are currently in. Thus, it is important to assess and evaluate the environment that we are in right now. What resources are currently available and may be made available both for the students and the teachers. What circumstances each and everyone is in at the moment. What financial, economic, social, and psychological factors are crucial to consider in deciding what directions to take. There is no one-size-fits-all solution or plan. Planning should be done very carefully and holistically. It should also be dynamic, flexible, and iterative. It should provide for constant critical questioning of the application of learning to the current demand of the profession. Next slide, please. In an article written by Dr. Keisha Ray in Tech Learning Inc. website, she describes remote learning as something a district or school should be able to switch off and on based on need. It provides an opportunity for students and teachers to remain connected and engaged with the content of a course while working from their homes. Bakit niya sinabi ito? Bakit pwedeng i-switch on and off? Kadalasan kasi, this is just a temporary arrangement that is adopted in place of the traditional or face-to-face method sakaling ang may mga pandemya or emergency na nangyayari. Transitioning to remote learning can keep students on track so that when they return to physical school environments, they will not need to complete a lot of make-up work to be ready for any scheduled assessments. Many of the requirements in a traditional classroom environment will be in play for remote learning environments. And the goal is to adhere to as many state and local requirements as possible. In our case, sa SLIS, what is the prevailing policy or guidelines issued by the UP system? At kung ano yung mga directives na national government. We should bear in mind na iba ito sa mga online courses or virtual schools or learning programs na mula pa lang sa umpisa, nakalatag na yung online curriculum at alam na kung ano-ano yung resources at infrastructure na gagamitin sa virtual or online class. Also, the efficiency of transitioning to remote learning is dependent on preparedness, technology tools, or overall student support infrastructure. So it is important that these three are in place when transitioning to remote learning. Next slide, please. Lastly, I would like to remind everyone with this quote from hybridpedagogy.org. Education happens everywhere, all the time, and people must be empowered to learn and teach throughout their lives. And because technology is incorporated in all aspects of our lives, people must also be empowered to conscientiously evaluate the role of technology in their learning and teaching. Maraming salamat po at magandang hapon sa inyong lahat.
Thank you so much for that informative session. We are indeed amidst a time of transformation and a time of uncertainty. Anyway, don't fret because the UPSLIS has several other related webinars lined up in the coming months to further help LIS educators in facing the challenges in the new normal. So now I'm sure that we all have burning questions in our minds. So let us take a look at the questions submitted via Menti. Okay, so we have some questions here posted, submitted via Menti, and I will just read some of the questions. Okay, so anyone can answer. Dean Grace and Sir Elijah, how do you intend to manage your classes this coming semester? Can you please describe it? What can your students expect?
Ayan. Si Elijah, would you like to go first?
Sige. Okay. For currently, I am planning to have course packs ready for my LIS 10 and LIS 51 classes. I am anticipating that there might be students who do not have access to gadgets and the internet. That's why I am thinking of compiling, aside from populating my OVLE with lessons and activities, I will be also preparing its print counterpart na naka-layout and ready to be inserted in loose leaf binders. If that would be the case, I will be also kapag merong naka-course pack na students, I will also be constantly communicating with the student with whatever means necessary or whatever means available for the student. So, thinking that the learner is the center of the learning process, as I have mentioned earlier, I will be considering kung ano yung available means na meron sila, and then kung kayang i-adjust yung course materials, specifically yung course packs, yung lessons at yung assessment tools, i-adjust talaga natin para sa kanila. So siguro, I am thinking of less synchronous meetings and more asynchronous activities, like online discussion forums and self-paced learning activities like mga guided lessons, modules, tsaka mga tutorials. With some assessment at the end, possibly mga MCQs or open-ended questions to probe further dun sa kailangan nilang matutunan.
Ayun. Sa akin naman kasi ang hahawakan ko yung LIS 181. So yung training, on-the-job training ng mga pag-graduate na natin or malapit nang gumraduate na estudyante. So ang ngayon ang ginagawa ko, na kikipag-coordinate ako directly sa mga librarians ng iba-ibang units sa UP libraries, yung mga unit libraries, para magtanong kung ano yung mga projects na pwede nilang ibigay sa mga mag-OJT natin na students para pagpasok nila or pag-enroll nila, meron na kaagad naka-ready na mga projects. So ito yung mga adjustments na dapat gawin, lalo na ngayon na hindi pa sila pwedeng pumasok or magtrabaho dun sa mga libraries. In fact, pati nga yung UP Main Library nagsara muna dahil nga MECQ pa. Ayun. Tapos yung iba naman kasi sa research naman, yung mga research writing naman yung course. So, close coordination ang gagawin namin. Yun nga lang, para po ang coordination puro online, so either Zoom, kung ano yung available na resources meron yung estudyante, pwede rin sa telepono. So, at the start nung SEM, aalamin na kaagad natin kung anong means of communication pwedeng gamitin nila or madaling gamitin para sa kanila para mas madali yung coordination.
Thank you, Sir Eli and Dean Mary Grace. We have another question. Let me read. If ever blended learning or distance learning works fine and serves its purpose well, should it be permanently implemented in UP for regular students, not for open university? Follow up to that, in our country?
Kung magiging successful. Kasi kung magiging successful ang blended or remote learning, kung matitiyak natin na wala na talaga totally yung digital divide, di ba? Kasi nandun pa rin yung possibility na may maiiwan kung halimbawa i-implement natin ito ng tuloy-tuloy na. Kasi hindi naman lahat talaga pare-pareho ang level ng access nila sa connection. So, ang mangyayari, malaking adjustments ang gagawin para matugunan yung pangangailangan at matiyak na walang maiiwan sa mga estudyante natin. So, kung sakali, parang pwede sigurong mangyari pero baka matatagalan pa. Pagka siguro nandyan na at sigurado na yung infrastruktura na kailangan para matiyak na walang magiging disturbances or magiging balakid para matiyak yung dire-diretsong flow ng learning and teaching and learning between the student and the teacher. Yan.
Ma'am Moyna, may I add to what din Mary Grace has mentioned? Since medyo administrative concern nga ito, no? Dahil nga ang curricular matter ito. So, kailangan dumaan nga sa proposal. Nabanggit nga ni Dean Grace na matagal-tagal yung proseso para magkaroon tayo ng panibagong mode o kung mag-normalize nga man ulit, magka face-to-face classes, may magkakapag-offer tayo ng distance education. Pero alam naman natin na may demand, nabanggit ko nga rin kanina, may demand for MLIS na i-deliver via distance education. In my humble opinion, siguro pwede naman, may posibilidad, pero kailangan nga talaga ng tama si Dean MJ, kailangan talaga ng kumbaga panahon, kailangan din ng masusing pagpaplano para hindi siya maging hit and miss na strategy. Alam na natin, naririnig na natin yung demand from our colleagues in Visayas and Mindanao. Sana makakapit pa sila para makapaghintay ng kaunti. Para kung makakapag-offer man tayo ng distance mode ng ating LIS degrees.
Thank you again, Sir Eli and Ma'am Mary Grace. Another question. Okay, if there is one piece of advice that you can give LIS teachers now, in this time of pandemic, what will it be?
Ayan. Ayun nga. Ano nga ba? Kapit lang, sabi nga ni Sir Eli, kapit lang kayo. Lilipas din itong pagsubok na ito, pansamantala lang ito. Pero isa rin siguro sa pinaka importanteng pwede kong maibahagi yung maging sensitive tayo sa pangangailangan, hindi lang ng mga kasama nating guro, kundi pati lalong-lalo na yung mga estudyante natin. Kasi sila rin yung magde-determine kung paano natin i-conduct yung ating mga klase or kurso. So, medyo mahirap, pero at the end of the day, ang titingnan natin, ano ang natutunan ng mga estudyante, paano nila ito maia-apply in practice, di ba? Kasi yun yung pinaka-importanting bagay na dapat nating ma-achieve. Kasi pagka naibigay natin yan sa kanila, hindi tayo naging bigo sa ating tungkulin bilang guro.
And for me naman po, aside from putting the learner at the center of the process, thinking about their welfare and their, kumbaga, sitwasyon ng mga mag-aaral natin sa ngayon, I also would like to encourage our LIS teachers na hindi tayo o hindi kayo nag-iisa. Ang ibig sabihin, hindi, kumbaga, kung tingin niyo mahirap, hindi tayo nag-iisa at kumbaga, now is the time that we activate our networks and help each other out in creating our resources for our students. Na-realize ko din kasi yon nung nag-ready tayo ng book chapters para sa isang project natin. Mahirap mag-isa gumawa. So I do hope that our LIS educators in the country are open to collaboration or collaborative work in developing our learning resources.
Actually, totoo yun, Eli. Yan yung ginagawa ng mga members ng CODLIS ngayon. Nagtutulungan sila kung paano nila aayusin yung mga courses, yung curriculum. Kasi iba yung mga learning objectives na sinet natin bago mangyari yung pandemya. And ngayon, kailangan natin itong i-recalibrate para magkaroon ng allowance para dito sa bagong paraan ng pagtuturo. So malaking bagay na nagtutulungan. Otherwise, ang hirap kaya nun para sa isa o dalawa lang na guro para gumawa ng lahat ng courses na yon para baguhin yung ano ba tawag dito? I-recalibrate yung learning objectives ng lahat ng mga kurso natin. Ayun. So malaking bagay na nagtutulungan tayo ngayong panahon na ito.
Okay, tama po. I agree with your answers, no, Ma'am Mary Grace and Sir Ila. We are all in this together talaga sa panahon na ito na we are faced with this challenge. We are in uncharted territory, no? So we have to collaborate. And tama yung sinasabi ni Sir Ila kanina, gamitin natin ang ating network para magtulungan. Okay, para sa ikabubuti ng ating mga mag-aaral, mga tinuturuan natin. Okay, sige po. We have another question. How will students who need to take their 160 plus series courses during this academic year be able to accomplish the requirements if their only available gadget is a phone? So this one is technological limitations. Sir Eli?
Ay, opo. Baka, sige, for me, since hindi rin ako nagtuturo ng 1/6 classes, may disclaimer lang, no? I don't teach 1/6 classes or the courses that use our computer laboratories. But I assume there are applications, Android applications, and iOS applications that could facilitate teaching and learning codes, HTML codes, and whatever coding exercises that could be given to our students. Siguro, meron ding mga websites na ma-visit ang mga estudyante, siguro i-recommend ito ng mga faculty para maturuan sila kung paano, o mabigyan sila ng mga exercises, maturuan sila kung paano yung mga kailangan nilang matutunan.
Ayun. Actually, meron ding mga programa ngayon na gustong umpisahan or pinopropose sa UP system. Ito yung mga programa or applications kung saan titiyakin kung ano yung kakayahan ng mga estudyante. So, ganun din ang pwedeng gawin sa 160. Yung mga mag-enroll sa 160, parang magkakaroon ng survey. Merong application yata na ipinopropose sila para matiyak kung ano yung kakayanan nila para matapos or makompleto yung pangangailangan, yung mga requirements nila sa 160. Tapos from there, pwedeng i-connect ito doon sa UP Kaagapay. Yun yung plano para malaman kung sino yung mga nangangailangan talaga ng gadgets, kung anong gadget ang kailangan para saan sa kurso nila. Pagkatas titingnan kung ano yung kadahilanan, bakit wala o bakit ganito, limited ang access. And from there, i-assess at kung nakita nilang talagang deserving naman estudyante na makatanggap ng assistance, magkakaroon ng ganong assistance na ibibigay sa mga estudyante. So, relax lang po muna yung ating mga estudyante. Huwag po kayong malungkot dahil gumagawa po ng paraan ang UP para matulungan po ay lahat ng mga, hanggat maaari lahat, kung kakayanin, lahat po para wala pong maiwanan.
Okay, thank you, Dean Mary Grace and Sir Eli. Then I have another question here. This one is specifically for Sir Eli.
Oh, okay.
Sir Elijah, what is the most difficult hurdle for you as a teacher in preparing for the flexible learning mode, and how did you deal, or how are you dealing with this?
For me, in my situation, the most difficult part of transitioning from, yun nga, yung siguro una talaga yung mind conditioning. Una yung parang nung una parang may grieving stage, yung parang 4 stages of may malungkot ka, tapos nagagalit ka, tapos ma-accept mo, tapos maka-move on ka. Ganun yung na-feel ko nung una, nung na-realize ko, na talaga ba, remote learning? May denial pa nga ako nung una na, talaga ba yan? Hindi, babalik yan after a few months. May mga ganun pa akong linya before. So, it was first all in the mind that I need to have a positive mindset about transitioning, na kumbaga, yun nga, nakakaya ko to, with the materials that I have and the ideas that we could share with each other, kakayanan naman natin mag-transition. Aside from the psychological aspect of transitioning for as a teacher, yung pag-verbalize, kasi 'di ba parang one technique that we were taught dun sa course redesign for remote learning is that you should verbalize what you're trying to say in class and say it and type it down as written text. Yun yung medyo mahirap kasi mahilig akong mag-adlib. And I sometimes overtalk in class. So, yun, pag nag-overtalk ako, ayan na, humahaba na yung binabasay ng estudyante, hindi ko ma-manage yung length ng text. And I would like to have a comprehensive text, but still long enough for them to actually have para ma-digest nila, ma-sustain yung kanilang attention. Yun yung isang mahirap. Yung siguro yung transitioning talaga kasi kompleto naman na yung slides. I am used to having slides for each lecture that I conduct. Yun lang talaga yung pag-editorialize. 2 things, my mind and editorializing. Yun, kailangan lang talagang tiyagain. Yun pala, how I dealt with it. Kailangan lang talagang tiyagain and have a positive mindset towards it.
Okay, maraming salamat, Sir Elijah. Okay. And we have one last question. Will the presentation be available after its live streaming? Okay, I can answer this question. The video will be uploaded in YouTube after the live stream in FB. So, kung later in the webinar na po kayo nakasali sa amin, you can still watch it pag upload po namin ito sa aming YouTube channel. Maraming salamat po.
Paulit-ulit.
Opo.
Salamat po.
Pwede nilang panoorin.
Thank you. Pwede nilang panoorin ng paulit-ulit.
Okay, so maraming salamat, Sir Eli and Dean Mary Grace. To our audience, thank you to our audience for your questions, and thank you, our speakers, for addressing all the queries that our audience sent in. At this juncture, let us proceed with the awarding of the certificates. Allow me to read the citation. UP School of Life Information Studies presents the Certificate of Appreciation to Dean Mary Grace P. Golfo-Barcelona for delivering her valuable webinar entitled Responding to Challenges, Transforming LIS Pedagogy as part of the 2020 School of Library and Information Studies lecture series in celebration of its 59th anniversary, given this 5th day of August 2020 at the UP Diliman, Quezon City. Signed, Professor Rhea Rowena Apolinario, College Secretary. The same certificate is awarded to Mr. Elijah John F. Dar Juan. Thank you so much to our speakers today, Dean Mary Grace and Sir Eli.
Thank you po. Salamat po. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. So thank you, Sir Eli, and thank you, Dean Mary Grace.
Salamat.
Maraming salamat po for this opportunity.
So that wraps up our webinar this afternoon. Please join us again next month for another installment in our Webinar Wednesdays series. Our next feature is entitled On Teaching Aids for LIS Educators. It will be on September 2, 2020. Thank you for joining us this afternoon, and I hope that you all had meaningful takeaways from our lecture. A big thanks to the SLIS faculty for making this event possible. To see our other upcoming activities, please follow us at our official FB page, UPSLIS, or visit our website, slis.upd.edu.ph. Finally, please don't forget to register using the link on the screen to receive your certificate. Again, thank you so much and have a good day. Bye!